Hello and welcome to the episode of the 1904 Club. That's the worst entrance I think I've ever done on this show. So apologies. Fletch, morning. Burnsy, morning. I'm totally distracted this morning.
Morning, everybody.
It's been absolutely chaotic and it's only 10 o'clock in the morning. So I guess that's a sign of things to come this week as we build into the first game against Bristol City. Burnsy, how are you?
I'm all right, thank you. Events away from football aside, which is doing me crusting, but many people's crusting. But yeah, I'm looking forward to a bit of City chat, and we'll get to it because I think there's a lot to talk about. You know, we're in the week of the first game of the season, and they look woefully short in terms of squad. And I mean, a question I put out this morning, I'll put to you two. You don't have to answer it yet, but if you're a player with Premiership or playoff ambitions, would you sign for Hull City now? I'm concerned that they've got in a state now where players will be looking at the club thinking, well, that's a painfully thin squad. You know, you're going to have to do a big selling job on me to convince me to come here rather than go somewhere else. So we'll talk about that this morning.
Fletch, how are you? Obviously, you weren't at Reading on Saturday. We missed you down there. I mean, there's only about 5 of us in the ground, but we certainly missed you down there.
It looked painfully shallow, didn't it? Around the what is it now? The Select Car Leasing Stadium, formerly the Medeski.
I'm all. It's a lot easier.
I'm all right. Yeah, health-wise could be better. I've had a dodgy weekend of it, not alcohol related as it normally is, but yeah, and I side with you, Burnsy. I walked through Hull City Centre this morning, and I'm delighted to see that everything is as cleaned up as it can be, and it just shows that the community's come together to, you know, try and eliminate the remnants of what the idiots have left behind, unfortunately. And that's what I'll say on the matter.
I think it was nice to see that the club put something out last night on Sunday. And I just reiterate those comments, really. And I think if any City fans, and I use the word fans, if any City fans are found to have been involved in any of this nonsense that's going on, not just in Hull, but across the country. We saw it in Middlesbrough, obviously the horrific scenes in Rotherham and just all over the place. If any City fans are found to be involved in that, I hope the club ban them for life and kick them out because they're not welcome. Burns, are you going to say something?
No, I was just listening, Baz. It was just what happened at the weekend was appalling. Hopefully we can find a way forward. But you know, if I come back to looking at players looking at the club thinking, "Whoa, I'm not sure they're going to be top 6. I'm not sure, you know." And we'll maybe come to a Asante Thomas or Thomas Asante. Why did he turn it down, Baz?
Well, yeah. So
was he at the game last week and did? And I know, you know, West Brom to Coventry, you don't have to move home, you don't have to do anything. But did he suddenly look at the team against Fiorentina and think, maybe not? I don't know. Do we know?
We were talking about him at Reading on Saturday, and I think because I looked at I listened to he did a 13-minute, I think, monologue, I think, with one of the guys from the Coventry media team, probably Leachy, actually, somebody I know well. And he was talking about Coventry and about how it was an exciting group. And I think, look, as much as it pains me to say it, the reality of it at the minute is Coventry's squad is far, far more exciting than Hull City. And I think for Thomas Asante, that really, I've got to be honest, that really hit me, that one, because, you know, I had a phone call on Tuesday afternoon to say the deal was done. I was given the figure that they agreed with West Brom, that he was coming to the game on Tuesday night, that all was well. And me and Fletch talked about it after the game, that you've got Thomas Asante coming in and you've got Marvin Malem coming in. That was positive. And I'd spoken to a couple of people about Thomas Asante, about what he was like as well. You know, I was told by people that know him well, that have worked with him for a long time, what a wonderful guy he was or is. You know, exactly the type.
Why did he change his mind?
You want to have in the dressing room? I think there was probably a combination of things. Location was one, you know, and I think you have to call a spade a spade. He probably felt that Coventry was, you know, a better fit for his career right now. And as I say, I don't like saying this because we've gone from, a few months ago in January talking about, a club that you'd want to join, a club that, you've got an exciting young manager. They're on the cusp of the playoffs. They've been in around it all season. They've got some really, really fine young players: Jaden, Jacob, Liam Delap, etc. Tyler Morton. They've gone from being that to a team that, quite frankly, look an absolute mess. And it's one of those, because I sat at Reading on Saturday, and for the first half an hour, I was really impressed with what I saw against the team. A League One team, but given what we've seen at times in pre-season, I thought I was really impressed. I liked that they were dominant, they controlled the ball, their movement was really good, they created moments. Malem looked bright and breezy, Cody Drame down the other side. They looked really good. And then, as Tim Walter said to me, at the end of the game, the same things happen. We've conceded a really, really bad goal, and then bang, all of a sudden, the game's completely changed and we're not in it anymore. And that is the concern. But yeah, look, you can't get away from the fact that the squad is just, we talked about this last week, comparatively where they're at transfer wise with what they did last season. They're not that far behind in terms of numbers in, but the makeup of the squad is a million miles away from where it was in terms of its depth and, the strength in depth it had, not necessarily the overall quality, but they had, you could look at that squad and you'd go, well, they've got, Cyrus Christie they could call upon. They've got Greg Doherty they could call upon. They haven't got those players anymore. So they're all over the place.
Can I just quickly interrupt you, Baz, and ask? Someone put this on social media. I can't remember who it was. It might just be from the rumour mill, but somebody said apparently Cyrus Christie was at one of the games during pre-season speaking with Tan. Is there any truth in that?
I mean, look, they keep in touch with a lot of their former players, don't they? So it wouldn't surprise me. Cyrus had a good relationship with the club. He was here for a couple of years. I don't think there's anything to read into that. They've obviously got Louis Coyle and they've signed Cody Drame. So I don't necessarily think there's anything to read into that. That is just how it goes. Equally, Milenkovic was at Fiorentina on Tuesday night against City watching. He's now moved to Forest. He was watching his former team as well. So I don't necessarily think there's anything to read into that. Burnsy?
Yeah, I was the one question, Jamie T. So we may as well get into it. We've got lots of response coming into the 1904 club. Jamie T. Jamie T. says on Twitter, only one question on everyone's lips currently. Where's Adjan?
Well, he'll be at the MKM Stadium on Tuesday because he's hosting a fans Q&A, I believe. I know that is true. Some fans have put out this morning they've had invites. It is a sponsor-only invite, I think. A bit like the one he did at the end of the season, that now notorious one at the end of the season, which I think a lot of people didn't feel it was the right thing for him to do. Look, there's a lot of questions at the minute for the owner to answer, and he's going to fly in tomorrow. He's going to say what he's going to say. What that will be, only time will tell. We'll have to wait and see. But people want to hear from him, and there's going to be fans that will hear from him. I guess the club will stream it, so people will be able to tune in and listen to it, and we'll see what he's got to say. So that's a watch this space.
People seem to be questioning his commitment. Is that a fair thing to say? I'm only going on what I'm sort of seeing on Twitter, and people are very concerned about his commitment.
Well, I think I said this after the game at Reading in the video that the optics of it don't look great. There's a lot of stuff about Fenerbahce. His media profile is such that he's being put out a lot in the media to do with signings that Fenerbahce are making. So I don't necessarily think his commitment's any less. He's still funding the club. The conversations I've had, I said this on Saturday, the conversations I've had with the owner are still the same amount as they were a year ago or before he became VP or vice chairman at Fenerbahce. He's still hammering Tan every day to get players in, to find out where they're at with players. So I think it's an easy accusation to make, particularly because obviously there's a lot of stuff being put on social media. And I think the other danger, just before we go to our special guest today, I think there's also a danger that there's people on social media that decide something's happening or not happening, put it out, that whips up the frenzy, and suddenly that becomes gospel truth, and everybody thinks that's the case. So I think we have to be careful that there are one or two people that are putting things out that don't necessarily have any foundation, and it is whipping up when a lot of fans are concerned, and rightly so, about the lack of transfers, the lack of squad depth, the quality of the squad, the comments coming from the manager, and we're only now 4 or 5 days away from the season getting started. I think naturally there's a lot of concern. So when people maybe put one or two things out on Twitter or wherever, those fans are nervous. They jump on the back of that, and it becomes a bigger problem. So, look, I don't necessarily think his commitment is any less. As I say, he's still funding the club every single day of the week. They're still trying to. They are working hard. I don't think we can. I think we can all agree it's been a frustrating summer, but I don't think anybody can accuse people of not trying to get players in. They've missed out on. They go for, as Liam said this time last year, they're trying to sign at this level top players, and there's a lot of competition, and you'll get some and you'll miss out on some, and they are expensive deals. They're not, with respect, they're not doing what a Morecambe did and signing 15 players and announce them all in one go and just taking players. They're trying to get specific targets, and that is, there's a few clubs in the Championship that are going for the same target, so it is difficult.
Fletcher, you got a quick thought? Because I know Baz has lined us up a top guest for this morning.
Yeah, I think to try and summarise, I feel from a transfer point of view, I feel the one thing that is sort of positive is that I think they are just they're going for players that are going to make a difference, and they're holding out to try and get those players in. I suppose the question that could dovetail from that is, was Liam Rosenior the pull to get those players in the first place? Like, what was the balance like to be able to sign the likes of Delap, Cavalier, Morton? And I know we've spoken that loan players will probably come in later in the window, but you look at the squad now, and a really trustworthy website that we use, all three of us use for our research, comes from Germany. It calculates the value of the squads in the Championship, and Hull City have lost 2/3 of their value. Last year, they were worth 120 million, according to this website. Now they're worth 40 million with the makeup of the squad that they have now. And for me, now, I don't feel the excuse of the Euros, for example, washes anymore, because people are doing more business. I think there's only 2 clubs at the moment in the league who have done either equal or less business than Hull City. So they've got to get a move on. They really do have to get a move on. And I hope that this Q&A that's been lined up for tomorrow answers some questions and calms the waters a little bit, because as you say, Baz, things can get whipped up very quickly on social media and we start panicking.
I think that's a very good point. I think it's important the owner comes out and talks to the fans, really, just at this point, because people are getting a bit antsy. Anyway, thank you to that Jamie T for the question to the 1904 Club. We will have more of your questions to come. Baz, special guest for us.
Yeah, we've got George Elek from the Not the Top 20 podcast, Championship expert. George, welcome to the 1904 Club. How are you?
Good, thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Look, I think everything at Hull City at the minute, the fans are really concerned. They've lost 4 in pre-season. They've drawn the other 2. They've conceded 16 goals. They've conceded 4. The thought that they were bringing in an attacking manager to try and take them on to the next level from where Liam got them to last season hasn't really been seen so far in pre-season in terms of results. From a Championship point of view, how do you assess the league as we go into it, on Friday night?
I mean, it's hard to assess. It's such a funny thing where at the beginning of August, we kind of all, as football fans, feel like we're set for the season, and you kind of forget that things change so much as the season goes on. And realistically, where you are now has like very little bearing to where you're going to be, not only in May, but also probably in November and December. I'm of the opinion, and I know some people disagree, but I think you can basically completely discount pre-season results. If anything, I'd say that teams who play poorly in pre-season often actually end up having quite a good start to the season, because your frailties are exposed. You give the manager and the head coach something to work on. It's normally teams who coast through pre-season winning 3-0, 4-0 who actually start the season with a bit of a bump, because there's complacency there, and they haven't seen how their weaknesses can be exploited. If anything, I'd say there's negative correlation, if any correlation at all. But with Hull, there are obvious reasons why, even as a neutral, you'd be concerned. It's a change of manager, which we'll see whether or not it's an upgrade or not. Certainly, it looks like the heart attack football we're being promised will be very different from the patient build-up play from Liam Rosenior. But obviously, when you look at the squad value and you look at the players that the Hull have lost and the talented players who are going to be playing next season in top-level football and probably have futures playing, or even next season in European football, have left the squad and are yet to be replaced, which is a concern because you look at the rest of the Championship where we're seeing a lot of moves. We're seeing top quality players being brought in. We're seeing a lot of clubs this season look further afield, look abroad for signings, which is something we've obviously seen Hull do pretty successfully for the last couple of years at times. And it feels like Hull are a little bit behind everyone else right now. What I would say is if, last season was an unbelievably competitive Championship because the three teams who came down retained so much talent and were so good that for Ipswich to do what they did was absolutely sensational. This time around, it doesn't look like the three teams coming down are going to be anywhere near the quality of those that came before that, and that should help. Albeit at the other end, I'm an Oxford fan, so maybe I would say this, but it doesn't look like, maybe with the exception of Watford, I'm pretty concerned about. There aren't many teams you're looking at from the outside looking in being like, they are a team that you really worry for from a kind of not just a footballing level, but also off the field too. So it feels a bit more compact, I'd say, like less dross, but also less real quality.
And Fletch, go ahead, Lindsay.
George, do you feel Hull City's a hard sell to players at the moment because they've not brought quality players in and other teams are doing it?
It's so difficult to know. Like if I was doing the recruitment at Hull, I'd point to Jayden Philogene and even Fabio Carvalho and say, look, we can take players of a certain quality and let them flourish. The Carvalho loan was a good loan, even though it didn't necessarily work out in terms of Hull's playoff hopes. He came in having had a really poor loan. He flourished and he's gone back to Liverpool. He's playing in pre-season really well. For Philogene, he comes in, gets regular first team minutes and gets to move back to the Premier League very, very quickly. If you're whether you're selling a loan spell or a permanent deal, I think Hull can very safely say we are a club that can showcase talent and elevate your kind of short-term career ascendancy. I guess the issue is that how much of that was down to Liam Rosenior, someone who's got a very good reputation within football itself for nurturing young talent. My hunch is that the reason why Hull are struggling to get players through the door is because of the calibre of players you're looking to bring in. It feels like the ambition of the owner certainly is that Hull should be a team knocking on the door of the Premier League. And to do that, you have to bring in a certain level of talent. It feels like the financial clout is certainly there to do so, but relatively consistently, Hull seem to be missing out on players, whether that's Brandon Thomas Asante, Alex Robertson, who was linked, who's gone to Cardiff. These are players who would have been good assets for Hull to have, and for some reason they haven't gone through.
Go on, Fletch.
George, you mentioned Liam Rosenior previously. Some fans are divided on whether it was right or wrong to dismiss him at the end of last season. As someone neutral in this, do you feel it was right or wrong to get rid of Liam Rosenior?
I think when you look at the reason that the owner gave for getting rid of him, I can understand it. For the way that Rosenior plays football, with that really patient build-up play, retaining the ball in deep areas, isn't for everyone. It was relatively successful. It managed to showcase the talent of certain players, but sadly, we're in a position where football clubs are private entities, and your owner decided that he didn't like the product that the team were creating, and he wanted something different, and you can't begrudge him that. Whether or not it was the right decision, I think we'll be seeing this season. They've moved to recruit a manager seemingly purely based on style over results. Quite clearly, Walter is someone who will bring who has in the past brought a certain level of attacking flair and ability to score goals, but at the detriment maybe to achievement, where I think over the last couple of seasons previously, he probably would have been expected to deliver a promotion, which he wasn't able to do. So I think Rosenior can feel harshly treated and hard done by. But at the same time, if that style of football isn't the image by which the owner wants the club to be built on, then it's hard to really begrudge him that, because it's his prerogative to be able to run the football club the way that he wishes.
And George, I think the impact of PSR as well is being felt, isn't it? I listened to at length Chris Wilder on Friday night after Sheffield United's game at Huddersfield, and he was bemoaning their lack of deals. And City fans are sat there thinking, well, hang on, you've just signed Callum O'Hare. We'd have quite happily taken him. But you've got him moaning. I know Paul Warren at Derby is not been, he's not been overly happy with not criticising the club, but the financial situation. We know that Norwich have got to sell a lot of players. They've lost Sarah to Galatasaray. There's talk that Jonathan Rowe could go. There's other players. Sargent could go. West Brom. There was a bit of a fire sale at West Brom last week. Obviously, we were involved in that with Thomas Asante. There are other players that they were trying to sign Mikey Johnston, and he was terrific last year. And it looks like they might not be able to bring him in now. Maybe he's a player that Hull City should look at. But the impact of PSR is being felt right across the division, isn't it?
It is, and I think that might have a knock-on effect because seemingly, these player sales with PSR forcing their hand can trigger the transfer fees recouped into being reinvested into playing squads, which might see a bit of a rush at the end of the window. Certainly in West Brom's case, it seems like they just cannot bring players in unless they raise the money to do so via player sales. So yeah, it is having a big impact. Whether or not, I'm not aware how much Hull's lack of transfer activity is due to that. Obviously, the sales of Greaves and Philogene means that massive fees have already been brought in already this summer. And obviously we've seen a pretty high level of financial commitment from the owner to the club already in the last couple of seasons. So it would be a surprise if we didn't again. But yeah, I mean, it definitely feels that way. And it'll be interesting to see as the window goes on. We've still got 4 weeks left of the window. I have no doubt that Hull's playing squad will look very, very different when that window closes on the 1st of September than it does now.
And Burnsy, that's the point to this, isn't it? Because we're all getting our knickers in a twist about the state of City's squad, that we know it's so weak. They haven't got the quality, they haven't got the quantity. But we also know history dictates that under Ajun, they are a club that do an awful lot of business late on in the window. We talked about this last week. In the final week of the window last year, they signed Ryan Alsop. Well, Scott Twine arrived just before that. Ryan Alsop then arrived, and on deadline day, you'd got Tyler Morton and Jaden Philogene. So and he's already explained publicly that he expects everything to happen after August the 20th. That's kind of the time in the month where he thinks that Premier League clubs will have decided what they're going to do, and that will filter down into the Championship. So we know that they have got a history of doing business late, and they will do business. That's why it's impossible to predict what we're going to see from City. Pretty much from Ellen Road on August the 31st, because we don't know at this stage what that squad's going to look like. We know there's going to be 5, 6, 7, possibly more arrivals, but as we sit here now, it's impossible to predict what's going to come, isn't it?
Yeah, but yes, I accept that, and I absolutely take George's point about pre-season, because I've seen pre-seasons where teams have been flying pre-season and they've been absolutely bobbins during the season. It's the nature of the beast. And equally, you can make a big start, a bad start, and recover. Look at Forest when they went up; they were absolutely nowhere, were they? But my concern is, do they get in this vicious circle where players look at it, and they've lost a couple of players now. They lost Kiefer Moore and they lost Thomas Asante, and I'm starting to wonder to what might have been considered playoff rivals, and I'm starting to wonder whether players are looking at the club thinking they've not done enough. It's a new manager. They look to have a thin squad. Do I want to commit to that football club now for the next season or whatever? I appreciate in the loan market. And I take George's point about they can point to the evidence of last season. This is what we did. That's my concern at the moment. And it is a new manager, so and he needs a chance. So I think it's important that the chairman's coming out and doing a Q&A, at least with the sponsors tomorrow, and we'll know where they're at. I do expect them to sign players, but I'm slightly worried they might be losing some. And I know we'll come to some of the players that are being touted at the moment and that might be coming in.
Fletch, are you? And we talked about this after the Fiorentina game last Tuesday night. Where are you at? Because again, as I said at the top of the show, the Reading the first half an hour at Reading they looked really solid. They looked, the Reading commentators were eulogising over how well they were playing, their movement, the rotations, etc. They just didn't get that goal, did they? Do you understand the angst amongst supporters that because they are so undercooked?
I understand that from a tactical point of view, they look horrendously open, which is my biggest concern from watching them through pre-season. I'm happy with the way they go forward, and if you put 2 or 3 new additions in there, they're going to score goals. But this is, as I've said before, this is going to be like Leonid Slutsky football in 2017-18. You're going to see lots of 3-2s, 3-3s, maybe even a 5-0 at Derby with,
Don't say that.
I know, but it might happen, Baz. It might happen. So, you know me, I always try and be as incredibly positive as possible. I always like to overfill my pint glass. But at the minute, I'm really struggling to see how Hull City can be a top 12 side after 3 months. And I disagree with what some people are saying on social media. I feel it's been a little bit, over exaggerated, and some people are, reaching to conclusions which are very not extreme, because that's the difficult word, but some people are saying like Tim Volta might lose his job, or Adrian's going to put the club up for sale. I don't see the foundations of why those things are being supported. My concern tactically is the too open defensively to nip it in the bud, and they need players quickly.
Can I just interject on that? Because I sat with Tim in the dugout on Saturday, and I said to him, I mean, he was spiky. I think it's fair to say he was not happy with the journey. It was, Hull to Reading is an awful pre-season game for anybody. It's a long way for a pre-season. They obviously had to do an overnight, so he wasn't overly impressed with the game. He wasn't overly impressed with Reading's tactics. The fact that there was a lot of crunching tackles for a friendly. But I put to him that they are very, very open in transition. That when they lose the ball, the opposition on his goalkeeper almost instantly. And he refused that. He said, I don't agree with what you said. And then he tried to explain why. He's the manager. He knows far more than any of us. But it is. I agree with you. You watch them play, and they look very, very good going forward. Admittedly, without the attacking players that they probably need at the championship level. But in transition, when they lose the ball, they are so open. They've conceded 16 goals. And yes, the caveat to that is they've played a Fenerbahce team it was their final game before Champions League qualification. And they just scored some terrific goals, all from City mistakes. They played a very, very good Newcastle team and given away 2 very, very cheap goals. And they've played a very good Fiorentina team and given away 2 very, very cheap goals. And then in that, you've got the Doncaster game, which was the under-21s, etc., etc. But that Reading game was another prime example of how open they are and how easy it is to get in behind them, particularly, and I'll say it again because I said it last week, down the left-hand side. I'm a big fan of Matty Jacob. I think he's got a great career ahead of him. But I cannot fathom out what Matty Jacob is doing right now. And he just looks... The system isn't helping him. He's getting no protection, and he's just making a lot of mistakes. Hopefully, those mistakes are ironed out, and come Bristol City, he will get the nod and he will play and he will find his groove. But if pre-season is anything to go by for Matty Jacob, that left side with Ryan Giles, and we don't know if Ryan Giles is going to be here come August the 31st, is a real concern for me. Every team in the Championship, 23 teams will all target that left-hand side.
And to bring... go on, Bedsy.
Can we come back to that? I'm conscious George is with us. I want to ask him a couple of questions on possible recruits. I want to throw some names. There is talk of Vito Manoni coming back as goalkeeper. Some reports this morning suggesting Oscar Zambrano is on his way from Ecuador. They've been linked with Scott McKenna Forest, though he's also been linked with Celtic and Rangers. That's a no-brainer, isn't it? But Saki at Palace, have they got a chance of getting him? George, have you got any sort of thoughts on any of these players? Baz, you'll know in a minute. We'll come to you.
I think McKenna would be quite a smart signing personally. He's someone who has performed well at championship level. He's won promotion from the championship. He's still only 27 years of age, so like he's got, you'd think a good few years in him. And he can play out from the back as well, which I think will be important to the way that Hull want to play. Raksaki, I think, would be really exciting. He is someone who, when he went on loan to Charlton season before last, it was just a joke that he was playing in League One. It was his first loan. First loans are often very difficult, and he came in. He was the best player that Charlton had that season. He scored a lot of goals. He was just, a level above. And I think it's a massive shame for his own development that he wasn't sent out to the Championship last season when he should have been. Instead, he was kept in and around the first team, was on the bench a lot for Palace, didn't really get an opportunity to show what he can do. So he would be an exciting one. Having said that, and, we won't talk about him too much, but they've just sent Malcolm Ebiowe to Oxford on loan. And I'd kind of be maybe a little bit surprised if they sent both out. The fact that Ebiowe went out suggests to me that maybe Raksaki is ahead of him in the pecking order and will be kept, at least for the time being, at Palace. But yeah, he would be someone who I think he'd fill the Philogene hole pretty well, even if he's not quite at that level yet.
We're smiling about Ebiowe, George, because he was on loan at City, of course.
I know.
And I remember sitting with Liam Rossini out in Turkey during the World Cup break in 2020, whenever it was, 2022, 23. He was eulogising over what a talent Ebiowe was. He'd obviously worked with him at Derby. He loved him to pieces, and they spent a lot of time and money in getting Malcolm to City on loan. It was just one of those that just did not work. It was, and it's sad for him because, he obviously left Derby after their relegation on the free, and he went to Palace, and there was a lot of hope for him, and it just didn't. His career's kind of stalled since then, hasn't it? So it's going to be really interesting to see how he goes with you guys.
I think he's.
Sorry, John.
No, I was going to say he's. I've had a few back and forth with Hull fans in the last couple of days on Twitter about this, because it's funny how you could have a player who's shown a certain level of ability, has a bad load, and for a lot of Hull fans, he's terrible and that's it. Like, full stop, no question about it. His attitude stinks. He can't be a success. I'm not entirely sure I buy into that. From the sounds of things, Ebiowe has, to the local press at Oxford, has kind of said that he knows that he hasn't gone well for him in his last two loans, and that this is probably his last chance to get it right, and therefore he's aware of how important it's going to be for him. Now, I watched a lot of him when he was at Derby, and he went from being a player who'd never played first team football to Derby's best player by a stretch. Like, it was absolutely ridiculous how good he was for them. And my hunch is, and I don't know this, is that he went to Palace, did well in the under-21s, had a lot of championship clubs after him, and probably walked into Hull thinking that he was the next big thing. And he, as first loans can often go badly, he was then quite quickly made aware that he wasn't. And rather than knuckling down and fixing that, maybe his ego got in the way and he went the other way. It's probably a learning curve. We've seen a hell of a lot of loan players who've had really successful times precede that with a really poor loan. And it feels like they learn a lot. As an Oxford fan, I'm incredibly excited to see what he can do, because I know how talented he is. I've seen how talented he is. Even for the Palace, we played Palace in the Cup a couple of years ago, and he was ridiculous that night as well, doing kind of flicks over players' heads and the rest of it. So, but it comes with a caveat that I'm also very aware that he's played championship football relatively recently for Hull and did not endear himself to that fan base whatsoever.
Well, I think the reason for that was we know how you say, like, defenders can get nosebleeds going up into the penalty area.
Yeah.
Play. Well, Malcolm Ebiowe, when he played for us, used to get nosebleeds tracking back. So I hope that he's.
Well, the good thing is
gone from his repertoire.
We play. I mean, the reason why Josh Murphy, I think, came to Oxford with a fairly similar reputation, albeit a bit older than Ebiowe, someone who Cardiff fans and Preston fans said had a terrible attitude, would do it in flashes, but couldn't really impact games. And that's what we saw for 18 months. And then Des Buckingham, our manager, came in and basically just put an arm around Murphy and then created a system and a formation that suited him, where we played with a ridiculously flat back four, to the extent that our left back, Joe Bennett, was just never really progressed anywhere past the halfway line. And the purpose of that was so that Murphy could stay high and just get the ball in advanced areas wherever possible. And that is probably the role that Ebiowe will play, where he won't really be tasked with tracking back. He won't really be given much defensive responsibility. It'll be a case of getting him on the ball in advanced areas as much as possible and let him do his nutmegging. So we'll see how that goes.
It's got talent. The lad's definitely got talent. Baz, quick, while we threw some names out there, quick sort of run through. Yes, no, possible, definitely not happening. Zambrano.
It sounds like that's moving quickly. He played last night, scored a goal, and he's done some media out in Ecuador, basically saying his bye-byes. So that's a really exciting one. He's a 20-year-old defensive midfielder, came through the same academy as Moises Caicedo. A lot of clubs, both in the Championship and higher up, have looked at him. It sounds like it's going to be a loan to buy, which is probably. I know City fans don't want loans. I know they want commitment and they want transfer commitment and players coming in permanently. But I think that's probably a safe one to have a look at him. You don't know how he's going to adapt to life in England. He himself has said. I listened to his interview earlier on this morning, and he said it's going to be a big leap for him, big challenge coming to England and playing in the Championship. But so that's one. The Rak-Sakyi one,
I don't understand the. Don't want loans, want permanent. I'd far rather have a good loan than a bad permanent transfer.
Yeah, look,
just want good players in the team. Okay,
yeah,
if they're only here for a season, they're here for a season. But you want good players.
Yeah, correct, 100%. Now, the Rak-Sakyi one's a really interesting one. So they have Rak-Sakyi have been chasing for well over a year, and they almost got him on deadline day. They thought they'd got him on deadline day in August. And Roy Hodgson was the manager at Palace at the time, had sanctioned the exit. And then pretty much at the 11th hour, Steve Parish pulled the plug on it and wanted him to stay. Now, as George has quite rightly said, in essence, for his career, it was a bad move because he obviously got injured and he wasn't really involved at Palace. I feel like Rak-Sakyi could have had that breakthrough season, a bit like Jadon did with City last year, had he have gone to City or somewhere else. It now looks like he's going to be allowed, that Palace are going to allow him out. The problem is, so City have already spoken to Palace already this summer. They've already had conversations with Rak-Sakyi at length on more than one occasion. And the feeling was a couple of weeks ago that City was his first choice and Palace's first choice. That the club had extensive conversations with Dougie Freedman. Now we're in a similar, and George touched on this as well. I think with Rak-Sakyi, we're in a very similar situation to where we were early last season with Delap, with Scott Twine, and with Fabio Carvalho. That there are 10, 11, 12 Championship clubs all want the same player. Now, City got Carvalho. They got Delap, they got Jadon Philogene, another one. They got Twine. Rak-Sakyi is the same thing. So it's going to be a case of trying to convince him above Leeds United, if that's a genuine link, which wouldn't surprise me because Leeds are after Jadon and Fabio Carvalho as well. They've got to try and convince him to come. They're in a weaker position this season than they were last season. That's a given because of the other player. That the squad just isn't where it was 12 months ago. So it is as you said, Burns, it is a more difficult sell. I don't think that's unreasonable to say. But they're in the market.
Don't show many videos from Hull this weekend either.
Well, yeah, but in fairness, that's been happening everywhere. So they're in for him. They want him. They've got a chance, and if they could get that over the line, that would be Philogene-esque levels for me.
Okay, quick couple of other names, and I think we all want to pick George's brains on where we should maybe, if we're having a small flutter on the Championship this season, where we should maybe invest. Vito Mannone, 36-year-old. I liked Vito when he was here before. Is he coming in?
It's a throwback to 2010, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, again, it would be. I know this. Again, some fans will say, "Well, that's a disaster signing. It shows we've got no money." That isn't true. Look, it's probably, I guess you'd say it's a sensible one. They've got a flurry of young goalkeepers: Pandor, Lototala, and Harvey Cartwright. Mannone is he didn't play much for Lille last season. Played a couple of times, 3 times in the Europa Conference League. Fast experience. He's 36. He's not going to cost a huge amount of money. Is it? I'd say it's probably fairly risk-free in many respects. goalkeepers generally mature with age. He's played millions of games. He's been here before. They obviously see Pandora as the long-term number one, and he actually looked better at Reading on Saturday. I think he is improving, which is natural. It's not. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to work that out. That'd make sense. Obviously, they're still in for Liam Miller. They're still who was at Preston last year. They're still in for him. I can probably see that one getting done, if I'm honest, before the window closes, because I think.
See a good signing, George?
Who's that?
Liam Miller, who was at Preston last year.
Yeah, I mean, on his day, he's basically unplayable. His issue has been that his day that maybe doesn't come along too often, but he's got raw pace, got a goal threat. I think he would be a good signing. Yeah, I think he's someone who you want as a pretty rotation option rather than that reliable week in week out player. But certainly got he's proven himself at the level to be eminently capable of winning games on his own.
And he's McAteer at Leicester, Baz.
Yeah, that's another one. There, just if we can just go back to Miller, I think there's a willingness, I think, from the player to move. It's whether they can strike a deal from Basel. The talk over the weekend was that the two clubs were distant in their valuations of the player, but I think City will get to the stage where they'll think we just need and we touched on this before, that they may end up paying a bit more to get the player they want. McAteer. Player they want. George, what do you reckon to McAteer at Leicester?
Yeah, I mean, he's someone who provides a really good goal threat, I would say, off that right-hand side. He's a right-footed right winger who can play on both wings. Unlike Miller, he's not someone who you necessarily expect to get on the ball and kind of beat players consistently and go on the outside of them and get to the byline, but he's someone who, albeit for a very good Leicester side, which you always have to caveat a little bit, especially when it comes to goal-scoring exploits, because they were able to create so many chances. He was someone who was often finding space in the box and able to tuck those chances away. I mean, he's very young. He hasn't played loads of minutes. Again, he's a young player who I can see why Hull would expect him to thrive, and for a team who'll dominate the ball, you'd expect it could be a good one. I think they'll both be decent signings, both good ages, both proven at a championship level.
I was just, you shook your head when I was going through a list of players, and I don't know whether you shook your head at McKenna earlier, Baz. Is that not happening?
I'd be surprised. So they've held talks with McKenna at length over the summer. For quite a while now, they've held talks. I believe that he turned down in the region of £35,000 a week at Cardiff fairly recently. So while he would not cost a transfer fee, that you're looking at probably significant millions of pounds over the duration of his contract. So that's a big, but that to sign a player on, he turned down 35 at Cardiff, as I've been told. You'd think that he'd want a bit more than that. So let's say 30. Let's joke 36. That's a lot of money for City to be paying a championship player. I know Mika Seri's on an awful lot of money, and I wouldn't be surprised if before the Saudi window, there's a lot of interest in him. The Saudi window closes in September. If Seri was to go off the wage bill, possibly, but McKenna's got a lot of interest. Obviously, Cardiff, Las Palmas are trying to. It sounds like in Spain are trying to do a deal. Glasgow Rangers would like him. So naturally, for a player of McKenna's quality, and he, as George said, I think he would be exceptional in that team because he's dominant, he's powerful, he's left-sided, he's a threat in both boxes.
Not coming though, is he?
He can bring it out from the back. No, he's not going to come.
I would. Not happening. Forget it. It's not happening.
The finances
it's not happening.
I just want to put a question to George whilst we've got him, because to promote what you do, George, you, as part of your podcast, you do things like Transfer Talk, where you look at sort of not unproven players, but players that we might not know about who play abroad. And Bristol City have just brought in a player from Japan. Is it? Forgive me for pronunciation there. I'm just getting my tongue in a twist. So Harakara, something like that. Something along those lines.
Hirakawa. Yeah.
And he was a player that you guys said would excel in the championship. So the question to link with Hull City is, because we, like every other club, we get lots of players' names thrown about. Have you spotted anyone that Hull City have been linked with, which makes you think, yes, go get him, that the fans might not know about? It's like with Zambrano from Ecuador, nobody knows much about him unless you are, completely engrossed in South American football.
I'm trying to think. I mean, what we do kind of to show you under the bonnet is, rather than being kind of world football and European football experts, is basically when these signings go through, we then pour over the clips and the data and then kind of form an opinion on that. Rather, I mean, I wish I had a great knowledge of all the Japanese players, but sadly that's not where we are right now. But I mean, the good thing is, I do think with the relaxation of the rules in terms of shopping abroad these days, there is a massive opportunity for clubs to recruit abroad, and we're seeing that happen a lot. And I think we'll see most clubs have done that this summer, and the success of that will dictate how often it's used going forward. But in terms of individual players, there's no one that springs to mind now, I don't think. I'm trying to think if there's anyone in League 1 or League 2 that we can pick up, but they've kind of all moved on. So boring answer, no. But invite me back in September once you've signed loads of players from all around the world, and I'll tell you what I think of them. I should say as well, I mean, in order to plug it, we have a website, not ntc20.com, and we cover every single transfer over the whole of the EFL in all windows. So if and when Hull do sign some players, you can go and you can see what we think of them there. And if you see such as players like Bristol City signings and you want to know what to expect, every single signing gets a write-up and a verdict from us. George,
on that subject, Charlie Hughes, centre-half at Wigan, is a player that City want.
He's one.
I think they've put in 2 or 3 bids so far, and they still want him. Fans keep bids. I know that's probably a question you were going to raise from social media. Where are we at with Charlie Hughes? Negotiations with Wigan continue. That, I think the feeling is the player is keen to come. But as yet, they haven't quite struck that deal with Wigan that's both in terms of value and payment terms. So hopefully that is something that they can get over the line, because they need cover. We know that Andy Smith and Stan Ashby are the only two young players below Sean McLaughlin who may yet leave, and Alfie Jones as well. George, talk to us about Charlie Hughes. What do you know of him? And he's a player that we know that can step out from the back, and that suits Tim Walter's system. Just give us a bit of insight.
He is a phenomenal talent, really, really good. He's someone, I mean, he fits into what Fletcher was saying there in terms of players that people may not have heard a great deal about, you've been linked with, who I'd really kind of push forward. He's just one of those centre-backs who, despite being really young, I mean, he's played a fair bit of football now, hasn't been in the first team for 2 years, but he's still only 20, and he plays as if he's way older than that, really comfortable on the ball, but also not one of those ball-playing defenders who kind of lacks anything defensively. He's still very, very strong defensively, can step out from the back and distribute from the back. He's someone I think would fit in really well to the Hull side we've seen in the last couple of seasons, where we know how Hull have looked to retain the ball in deep areas with a lot of possession being recycled through the defensive line. I think he'd be a brilliant acquisition, someone who I think Wigan are very keen on keeping him, but he's someone who I think would be a shrewd pickup. And then just another one to throw into the mix as well, having had a look through, we do a series every year called 21 Under 21, where we go through the best 21 players, age 21 or under in the EFL. And given what's going on at West Brom, I do wonder if Tom Fellows might become available, who is a wide player who burst on the scene, having had a loan at Crawley the season before in League 2, but just a wide player who I think fits in exactly to the kind of players that we've been talking about. Philogene, obviously, from last season, but also Miller this season, Raksaki, just those wide players who are really direct, look to be really positive on the ball every time they get it, happy to take on their players over and over again, and a goal threat as well. And if West Brom are in some financial difficulty, if they do need to raise funds, if Tom Fellows is going, on the cheap, like we saw Brandon Thomas-Asante last week, then he's someone that I'm sure a lot of Championship clubs are looking at and waiting to see if he becomes available.
That's the thing there, isn't it? As we touched on before, there's a fairly small pool of players in attacking senses that a lot of the Championship clubs are all going for, aren't they? And it is, the clubs are going for the same sort of players, and it's that makes it difficult, doesn't it?
Yeah, massively. And that's the issue. I think that's why it's so frustrating, especially now with loans, how most of these clubs want to get their young players in, probably take them on pre-season tour with them, have a proper look at them. We're now 4 days from the start of the season for teams who are playing on Friday night. And there are still loan players who probably who Premier League clubs know will be going out on loan, but still haven't been made available to do so, which is a frustrating position to be in. Personally, I think the window should close yesterday. I think the window should close before the season starts. It would make everything much easier. But I guess the powers that be, those who control most of football in the country, would disagree.
That's the thing, though, isn't it? And that's as daft as it sounds. That's why you want. And I think you mentioned this earlier on. You almost write off the first month of the season, which is ludicrous when you get to the back end of the season when you think, well, we're at like City, 3 points off the playoffs with an inferior goal difference. If we'd have only picked up a point here and a point there, maybe at the start of the season when we were still finding our way through the first month, waiting for signings to come in. If City had had Jadon Philogene at the start of the season and Tyler Morton, maybe they don't go to Norwich and get beat in the last minute. Maybe they get a point. And there's other games, isn't there?
I mean, it's like last season. Southampton opened the season away at Sheffield Wednesday on the Friday night, and James Ward-Prowse started, Nathan Tella started, Alcaraz started. None of those players were there a month later. Romeo Lavia was on the bench, who was at Chelsea a week later. Like it's a false economy. This isn't a reflection of what the team will be in the actual season.
So is that should we, in that sense, then urge caution about losing the plot too much at this stage? Because
definitely
we know that so much is going to happen between now and August the 30th at 11 o'clock.
Yeah, and I guess those who are upset now might, if things don't come off, will say, look, I warned you. But at the same time, if suddenly 5 players come in the next 10 days or so, then people aren't going to be overly, they're not going to think back to this and think, oh yeah, I was wrong, because it's natural for football fans to be emotional and be reactive to things. So there's a long way to go. I think you can only judge a window once it's closed, and obviously right now for Hull fans it's a concern, but you can't say if it's been a good window or a bad window until you know the fruits of the labour.
Absolutely. Burnsy, what have you got?
No, I absolutely take that point. But if you lose all your games in August because your squad's not strong enough, and pre-season, and I know what you're saying about pre-season, and I agree with you, but pre-season is showing that you're not defensively strong enough, your keeper's not strong enough, your left back's not strong enough, your midfield's a bit porous, and you've got a manager playing a new heart attack football system, and you get 4 results or whatever in August that are damaging, then it becomes very difficult. Never mind what you're doing in the people get very antsy. That's twice I've used the word antsy, and that's the problem. They've got to show something in this month, and it doesn't. He's a front-footed coach, but from what I've seen pre-season, that means it leaves them open at the back. And I come back to the goalkeeper's not strong enough. They're weak. So that concerns people. It concerns me as to, they might make a really damaging start, and then the manager's under pressure, which I think is unfair, really, because this is not of his making. So it'll be interesting to see how they go. Fletch?
I've just to, at the time of recording, I just want to make a point. We've been speaking about Q&A this morning. I'm interested by the wording of it. Hull City have literally, in the last minute, tweeted to say that their chairman, Adrian Ilagella, has called a special Q&A for tomorrow. It says to brief fans on his plans for the future. Now, I might be overthinking that, but the way it says his plans for the future, I think might just be to calm waters and just to say that he's possibly still very much in the same involvement as he is now, given that he's at Maribor and Fenerbahce. But that's just to let everyone know that it's official. There is a Q&A tomorrow.
11 o'clock in the morning. It's and it will be exactly that, Fletch. It will be Adrian trying to calm people down, trying to say, look, this is what we're trying to do. This is where we're at. I don't doubt he will talk about the finance they spent last season and the feeling that they didn't get to where they should have done with the squad they had available. I think he will talk about that again and say that financially we've had to be a bit more careful this season, this summer, a bit more prudent because of not getting in the playoffs. I think he'll talk about that. He'll obviously talk about transfers. He may well drop a name or two, although he's been very cautious. They have been very, and I've got to say it, they've been very cautious this summer. Maybe in the past they've been a bit... They've been quite happy to talk about specific targets. This summer, I know Kiefer Moore was one they wanted keeping really under wraps because they didn't want to alert other parties to his availability or the fact that they were in talks with him, and they missed out on him. Obviously, yeah. So it'll be interesting to see. There was another name, Burnsy, João Costa from Roma, 19-year-old Brazilian winger. That again, that they've got a link with Roma. They were talking about having a bigger link a couple of years ago. That didn't materialise. They moved on from that. But they've still got obviously a relationship with the powers that be at the Stadio Olimpico. So that would be an interesting one. But I suspect that might be if they don't get Raksaki or if they don't get Liam Miller.
I'll come back to what Fletcher's. I've just had a look at that tweet, but I'm conscious George is in demand and got other things to do. Where can we find you, George?
So make sure you check out Not the Top 20, which you can find on any podcast platform. We released our 1 to 24s yesterday. So we go through each league, Championship, League 1 and League 2, starting at 24th and going up to 1st as to where we predict each team to come. No, I'm not going to tell you where we said Hull. You have to listen if you want to do that.
I have. I won't spoil it though for you.
And then they're also on YouTube as well. So Not the Top 20 on YouTube. And I'm on Twitter at George Elek, ELEK. So yeah.
George, the difficulty, and we've been doing this as well, trying to do our, everybody and their dog does the previews and the predictions and all that sort of stuff. And Burnsy was actually the inspiration, weren't you, for promotion from League One a couple of years ago?
Why? Because I said they were not going to do it.
Well, yeah, grabbed the camera to the dressing room, didn't he?
Did he? Probably.
Didn't you say they were going to finish 15th?
I might have done.
Yeah, but George, the thing is, though,
it's a mugs game.
Yeah, exactly, and it's impossible because for the reasons we've talked about the transfer window. If I was nailing my colours to the mast now, and I've said this I remember saying this on the final day of the training trip to Turkey a couple of weeks ago. If things don't improve and they don't sign some good players, there's a genuine concern that they'll be in a relegation battle. And I haven't, from what I've seen in pre-season and the transfers they've made so far, I've seen absolutely nothing to suggest to me that they're going to they won't be in a relegation battle. I think they will, but there's a month to go until the window closes. So how that squad looks today is they're not good enough. They are 20th, 21st. They're going to be scrapping to stay in the division. Fast forward a month and they've signed 6, 7, 8, 9 players, and you've got a Liam Miller. You might have a Raksaki or equivalent. You've got another couple of strikers in the door. Suddenly you go, actually, that squad now, I think, is capable of competing towards the top half. It's impossible, and I think people need to be aware of that. That when predictions are made, on the 5th of August, that they're with what we know so far, and we can't. It's all conjecture. The clubs may sign him, they may sign him, but they haven't signed him yet. So we can only go on what we can see in front of us, can't we, George?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's fair to say that had the window closed yesterday, our prediction of where Hull would finish would have been very different. We kind of factored in the recent transfer activity, the ambition of the owner, the level of spend that we've seen in the last couple of years into where we predicted you to finish. Whether or not that was wise, we'll have to wait and see.
How do you view the championship?
Thank you for your time. George has got to go.
I've got to go.
Baz.
Thank George. Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Cheers, guys. Best of luck for the season. Speak soon.
Cheers, George.
Sorry, Baz. He's got to go. He's got to go at 11, and we've hit it.
We've exhausted it. So let's just
okay. on Adjun's or the club's little message. Our chairman Adjun Ilagella has called a special Q&A on Tuesday, 6th of August, to brief fans on his plans for the future.
Why does he say his?
For the future. Well, yeah, that would be my question. His and the club's plans for the future, or the club's is that. Am I reading too much in it?
I'm hoping it's just the way it's written. But we 2 of 3 of us here have immediately jumped on the fact of a certain 3-letter word. We're not trying to, cause trouble by saying that. But I've never seen a statement before that directly highlights one individual. Because
but he is the owner, isn't he? He ultimately. He pays the bills. He has ultimate say on the decisions. And let's be fair, some of the decisions over the summer haven't been great. And Adjun pays the bills and he employs people to do the job. Now there's a question about have some of the people that he's employed done the job, as well as what They might have done. I guess again that'll all come out in the wash over the next month. We'll know more when we sit down after the 30th, and we can reflect and go, well, actually, no, he's not done his job properly, and he hasn't done his job properly. But ultimately, Adrian is the guy that. So yeah, I get what you said
tomorrow,
but he is. It is his not his club, of course. It's not. It's the fans' club, and the community's club. But he is not the dictator as such, because that makes it sound far too dramatic. But he is the guy at the top, and he is the guy that dictates, who does what job, who gets paid what, and ultimately he has the final say on everything within the football club.
Yeah, the only reason I mention it is because I've seen press statements before where it'll say, for example, to highlight the club's future plans. For example, that's the only reason I raised it. I'm not having a personal pop. It's just that's how I would expect it to be written. That's all. I
don't know if we can check this out, but when they put a statement out way back months ago, before that now infamous Q&A he did at the end of the season, where he flew in and he talked to fans at the stadium, I'd be interested to check how that was written, because I feel, and I might be wrong, don't quote me on this, but I feel that it was almost the identical line. Adrian is going to hold a special Q&A to tell fans about his plans for the future. And I don't think it said the club's plans. I think it said his plans, and that was the one back in May, or early, just after the end of the season, just after Liam Rossini had lost his job, and there was mass outrage, mass panic about the manager going, and he flew in and he did. It was the Ryan Alsop one and all that sort of stuff. I feel from memory, and my memory is not great, admittedly, that the wording was almost identical, if not the same.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, it's good that he's talking, because I think it's important. There is a lot of uncertainty in and around the club at the moment, and it's good that he's talking. But I see, I was raising the same point. I see Fletcher's interpretation or possible interpretation of the word, and you just think, what's this about? But we'll know tomorrow morning.
And normally, I just wanted to very quickly box off and say that I remember under the previous stewardship and ownership of the football club, it used to be an annual thing where you'd maybe sit down with the owners at the start of the season and go through everything. And then if anything catastrophic was happening during the season, there would then be the opportunity to speak again. I think it's actually applaudable for Adrian that he speaks as often as he does.
Well, I think, look, and this is something that's got, and I wanted to bring this up as well, that this is something I've seen a lot on social media over the last couple of weeks. Well, probably a couple of weeks is a bit too much. Maybe the last week, 10 days. A lot of fans calling on Adrian and Tan to come out and say something. I think there's a danger here that you can say too much. Adrian has said quite a bit, both through the whole Daily Mail. He did the press conference out in Turkey. He's done Sky. He did TalkSport after Liam went. I think he's done TalkSport again since then, if memory serves. And Tan has done, albeit in Turkey, he's done interviews in Turkish media. Out in Riva, both myself and Mike White from the BBC, we sat down and did interviews with him. I think what City fans, and I get that they want to hear from these people to find out where things are at. Because at the minute, and we have for the last couple of weeks only heard from, pretty much since Fenerbahce, we've only heard from Tim Volter. I think you have to be careful that people like Adrian and Tan aren't saying too much. What City need is actions. They need players through the door. What they don't need is Adrian coming out and going, "We're going to sign 4, 5, 6." Because he did an interview with me at the end of the season after Liam had gone, talking about giving a war chest to the new manager, about signing 8, 9 players, 10 players, whatever it might be. So we've heard that before. We've heard that they're going to sign what the owner and the vice chairman are saying, that they're going to do X, Y, and Z. What fans want to see is players actually in the door now. And as you might come out tomorrow, and he might say, "Well, we're going to sign player X on Thursday, and we're going to sign player X on Friday, and we'll have another 25 in before the window closes." But that's all well and good. But that isn't players actually signed, sealed, and through the door. Obviously, I ran a report last Tuesday from a very, very good, a terrific source, I would say, that Thomas Asante was a done deal. Well, it wasn't a done deal because he isn't a Hull City player. So I think we need to be careful here. We're not hearing too much from interviews and promises. We need to see actual players signing and sign on the dotted line and being made available to the manager to play.
And it's really important that from social media we have to take everything with a pinch of salt, Baz, because I'm reading the comments on the club's post about this, and it's almost like it's been out for 13 minutes in the time we've been recording, and there's already plenty of comments which are so negative and people fearing the worst. It's like, but we've got to let the man speak to actually outline, because at the end of the day, you've got to hear it from him to find out what's going on.
Burnsy,
the nature of the beast. It's the nature of the beast. We both picked up on his plans bit, so people do it. But it's a good thing he's coming out and talking, because personally, I feel it's the right thing to do at the moment. And as I say, calm the waters a bit. Sorry, Baz.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and there's people on social media that have decided that he's going to put the club up for sale, and he's basically the narrative that is being driven now from some is that Ajan doesn't care about the club anymore. He's washed his hands of it. All he cares about is Fenerbahce. He's going to put the club up for sale. His assets dripping it. He's going to put the club up for sale. That is what some people have decided is happening. So when they see the fact he's going to come over and he's going to do a Q&A, and the wording as you two have picked up on, they've decided, well, he's going to come and sell the club, and we're going to go bankrupt. We're going to be in administration by Thursday. That is how some football fans operate. It is always the worst case scenario. And I think, so I guess, look, we'll have to wait and see what comes out of it tomorrow. It will be him coming out and talking about, the need for patience, the need for fans to believe in their, I hate the word trust in the process, hate that, because every manager and his dog, Liam used to use it all the time, and it used to annoy me. But everybody in sports seems to use it now anyway. He'll say, look, trust us. Look at what we did last season. We brought Jayden in on deadline day. We brought Tyler Morton in on deadline day. Twine was much later. I think the 17th of August, Scott Twine arrived. Trust us that we will get this right, and we'll have to wait and see. But I think, unfortunately, when you get, because of the perils of social media, and I know that as well as anybody, given the abuse I get on a daily basis for simply trying to do my job. It's people whip stuff up, and when one person says something, and they might say, "Oh, I've heard sources, I've heard whispers," giving their own, giving it credibility. Suddenly, other people jump on the back of it, and before you know it, this thing is spiraled out of all control, and the world's going to end tomorrow.
But I do think that. Oh, sorry, Benzie, go on.
No, I was just going to say, I'm looking at the time here. And we've had a good crack at it on the 1904 club. So have we got a special edition tomorrow?
I was going to say, we haven't even touched Saturday yet, have we?
Yeah, well, that's I mean, what can you say?
We're doing another one later in the week.
We've basically with George, we've basically written off the entire month of the season, saying it doesn't really matter because we don't know what players they're going to have. They will have new players, and we'll have to come. We'll take it seriously from Ellen Road on the 31st. I think we probably need to get together at some point over the next, couple of days and dissect what was said, because it will be streamed live. So that, from what I gather, media aren't invited, but they weren't invited to the one, the previous one in May. So media I will not be there, but I obviously will be following it. Unless that changes, that's the situation as I'm aware at the minute. And I'll be watching on the stream myself. So we'll probably need to get together over the next couple of days and chew the fat over it, won't we?
Okay, and by which time Fletch might have been able to find the light switch.
I'm surprised they haven't come on.
In his den.
Right, that's it then. Burnsy, thanks for your time. Fletch, thanks for your time as always. And to George Elek from the Not the Top 20 podcast. You've probably heard of it. You've probably seen him on Sky Sports. Listen to them on 5 Live. You can get their podcast pretty much in the same places you can get this. So thanks for getting involved, everybody. Stay strong, and we'll be back very, very soon.